Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody. It's Monica again. And before we get started on today's episode, I want us to shift gears a little bit and talk about a problem that I have. I'm using this time before the episode kicks off as free therapy, so please bear with me. In the United States, we are currently in the tail end of the American football season. And we are in the playoffs, which means, it is sudden death. Whoever wins continues on all the way to the Super Bowl. And for our listeners, Milena and I are from the beautiful Windy City here in Chicago, and our Chicago Bears are in the playoffs. And last week they played our rivals, the Packers from Wisconsin. And it was, let's just say that blood pressures were high in Chicago for that win. Right. And I have so many questions of how that's a possibility, how we were able to even win, and also how did so many people smuggle cheese graters into the stadium? But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. My problem that I have right now is that I'm superstitious as fuck. And over the last couple of regular season games, when the Bears were making poor decisions and maybe not winning or losing, I ended up turning off the televisions. And for those games that I turned the televisions off, the Bears ended up winning and I had to watch the replays. And that exactly happened during the Bears-Packers game. I was watching the game in the first half and they were bad. So I said, all right, I'm turning it off. And then all of a sudden they started playing well. And then I had to watch the last half on a replay because I didn't watch it live. And I don't know what I'm going to do, guys. They are playing again this weekend. Does that mean I can't watch the game? And then I start spiraling and go, oh my gosh, what if they win the Super Bowl? Am I not going to be able to watch the Super Bowl if they make it? And then all of a sudden, what if they win and they haven't won since 1985? And I'm going to be so superstitious, or I'm not going to be able to actually watch something that brings me true joy. And what if they win? And I'm going to have to just watch the replay and hear the hooting and hollering and the fireworks all the way outside with the entire city of Chicago basically melting down. And okay, relax. Calm down. So that's my problem right now. And I don't know if any of our listeners have anything similar where they're superstitious with certain things, even if it's sports or music or dance or whatnot. But I'm having a little bit of an internal conflict here. And I don't want this to translate into racing because if, for example, if Pato won every race because I turned off the race mid-race, I probably would stop watching IndyCar races and watch the replay so that Pato can win the 500 and the championship. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to bring this football superstition into racing. So I got to get my shit figured out, right? I gotta figure out like what the hell I'm doing here as I cry about how silly this sounds now talking about it into a microphone. Thank you for coming to my therapy session. I approve. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And when we get back in the next episode, we can talk a little bit about whether or not I succumbed to my superstitions. And if the Bears won, did my superstition actually work? Or did they lose and I just wasted not watching the game because I'm a little crazy? You know what? Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's now start thinking about some IndyCar. There's no cars on track, so I can't be superstitious yet about the season. So how about we get started? All right. Thanks for listening to my crazy superstitious TED Talk. All right, so let's get back to what we're here to do. Let's talk a little bit about IndyCar and what are the news outlets saying. Now that the season is starting to get closer and closer, right? We're about a month and a half away from St. Pete. Yay! I'm so excited. And motorsports is starting to defrost. We have a lot of series starting to kick off in the next couple of weeks, which means the light is at the end of the tunnel. This has been a hell of an off season. That said, the news cycle started actually, getting a little hot. So let's talk about just two big question marks still, in the world of IndyCar, and that's around Dale Coyne. Dale did not have news around his second seat. Sorry. If you've been waiting with bated breath about the second seat, about Dale, it's not that. It is about sponsorship. So last season, Dale had Renus VK on his team, and he had a sponsorship with Todd Alt through Ask Roy or ROI, right? And in Nashville, they had a beautiful little ceremony where they unveiled a beautiful livery, and Todd and Dale were there hand in hand saying that the partnership between Alt and his companies and the sponsorship will continue into 2026 with Dale Coin. So tell me why I was so shocked when I opened up Racer Magazine and I saw Meyer Shank Racing partnership with Ask Roy, Todd Alt's company, for their IndyCar and their IMSA series. What? And I get it. You can write multiple checks, and there's a lot of other teams that share similar or the same sponsors, right? Like drivers might have the same sponsor for certain. I get that. But this guy, Todd, he gets around, right? He had a partnership with Ed Carpenter Racing, which Ed Carpenter ended up suing Todd Alt for $10 million of unpaid sponsorship money. And you want to know what's the kicker here? Todd Alt didn't have to pay any of that because he didn't sign his contract at ECR that he was going to fund a $10 million sponsorship. It was all done via email, which means legally he was not obligated to pay that $10 million. What is up with racing teams not signing fucking contracts? It gave me Alpine Oscar Piastri vibes. Like the fact that the judge was like, guys, just because he promised you over email doesn't mean he legally has to pay you $10 million. And ECR was pissed. That's a lot of money. So I understand why people were going, wait, so what's going on with Dale, right? Well, Todd has gone on the record and said that the sponsorship and the partnership and his commitments to Coin still stand. He is just funding additional dollars and cents to Meyer Shank Racing, and they are going to run liveries on both cars for Marcus and for Felix next year, as well as their IMSA series. And I get it. Sponsors prioritize teams with proven performance and stability. Let's say that one more time. Sponsors prioritize teams with proven performance and stability. But it gave me a bad taste in my mouth. I cherish Dale Coin Racing. I know that Dale sometimes can come off as the little tiny team that can on the grid, but they are a family that really loves racing, and they need every dollar and cent for this IndyCar team. Dale puts a lot of his own money into this team. And while he wants to do that, it's also a business. So as a businessman himself, Dale's probably like, whoa, I'd like to have some sponsors come in so I can, make some money. And that's okay. And it kind of really bothers me that Todd kind of did that, because Todd also has a relationship with Roman Grosjean. So is Todd sitting on Dale's shoulder going, hey, buddy, my commitment still stands. My dollar still stands. If you sign Roman as the second seat, don't sign Linus, don't sign Connor and somebody else if they can do half seat, whatever. And it kind of just really bothered me. And I really hope that it's not a setback for Coin. I hope that Todd has enough money to give to everybody, apparently. Hey, Todd, can you write me and Melina a nice little check? Thank you. So we'll see what happens with the sponsorship deal with Dale. And I'm hoping that Dale actually had him sign a contract and it wasn't some, handshake deal in the back of a Nashville bar and said, okay, let's do this. God, what is up with teams just doing all these handshake deals? Put some pen to paper, especially when it comes to sponsorship. We all know driver contracts aren't worth anything, but sponsorship, that you need to have some ink dried on a piece of paper, right? Wow. We'll also talk a little bit about the other elephant in the room, which is Prema. So there has been some shakeups in the ownership of Prema. So they've gone through some major leadership shifts with the departure of co-founder Angelo and his son Rene and Angelina, impacting the IndyCar Series program. The exits that they had for the media are still unclear, but it is expected to affect upcoming racing seasons. We all know that Rene is synonymous with Prema. We've seen him in Formula 2. We've seen him in Formula 3. We've seen him in the IndyCar, on the IndyCar grid. And it's really really interesting to see what's going to happen. And these, funding challenges around Prema is now becoming more and more loud. And we all knew that they were facing financial difficulties and they were looking for new investors to compete in 2026. We know that discussions are ongoing with interested buyers. There have been some big names that have officially bowed out, but there's still some people talking, which is a good sign. The teams must secure engine and tire contracts by the end of January for the February season tests. It is January. It's almost the middle of January. So Prema literally has 2.5 weeks to get their shit together, find millions of dollars in sponsorship, or or a buyer that's willing to buy the entire outfit of the team, and secure an engine and tire contract by the end of the month. So there's a little bit of some sense of urgency and a fire lit under the Prema asses. And who knows if Prema's going to be on the grid. We might find out who these buyers are, or we're just going to have only chartered teams. I guess we're going to have to see. And I guess we're going to find out basically in the February test, which is crazy to think. Like, I know Schwartzy has other options, and I know Callum has signed with another team for endurance that didn't, conflict with the IndyCar series. So they have plan Bs, but it goes back to me talking about it from last week's episode. Callum was at the Prema HQ last week. Was that for a goodbye party or was that to meet with a potential buyer? Questions. We shouldn't have so many questions about a second seat and 2 additional seats on the grid. I'm sorry, we shouldn't. Makes me start to think, would a Dryer Reinbald Racing and then Able Motorsports be interested in buying out the outfit? There's so many questions and so many conspiracy theories about what's going to happen now. It's going to impact, the Indy 500. It's going to impact the season. They spent millions of dollars to have, a rookie on pole at the 500, and then they're going to Houdini out because they ran out of money. That sucks. That really does suck for them. So I'm hoping that we'll at least have one Prema car on the grid, or insert new team name here. I don't know. There's so many question marks still left over, and we have less than 3 weeks to get this information all buttoned up and ready to go. Nuts. It's absolutely fucking nuts. But outside of that, the news cycle has been fairly quiet. There have been some, discussions around some leadership changes around the promotional side for Long Beach, I believe. But the teams are preparing for the February test. Drivers are starting to really ramp up the performance side and going back to the gym. And it's officially like their extended long 5-month holiday is officially over. So it is now time to go full speed ahead into 2026. So let's go into some Indy basics. So for all of the listeners, we did do a segment again in our last episode. I definitely recommend going back and taking a look and listening to that section. For this section, we're going to talk about qualifying first. We're going to talk about testing formats, and then we're going to take some time to talk about push to pass and how it works, and what's the difference of push to pass between what DRS RIP and the new overtake mode in F1. So let's talk about qualifying. So for qualifying in IndyCar is track specific. So when you're thinking about the tracks, we're going to break down qualifying based on the type of track. So we'll do ovals, road, and street courses. For oval racing specifically, we're going to take it a step further and break it down between regular oval qualifying and then the Indy 500 qualifying. So let's take a deep dive into oval qualifying in IndyCar. So oval qualifying in IndyCar, they do not qualify as a group. It is an individual qualification. They are put in a order, which is based on reverse ranking of entrant points. When it comes to, let's say you're in Milwaukee and you are 20th out of 27th or 25, depending on Prema, you are going to go earlier in the day versus somebody, let's say like an Alex Blow, who primarily qualified on the ovals last. Teams without points are placed first, arranged by a random draw. So if you have any teams that do not full seasons and they just show up to an oval and they don't have points, let's say Phoenix, for example, it is going to be a If you don't have points, you go first. If there's a bunch, then there's a random draw. Each entry gets one guaranteed qualification attempt. And what is a qualification attempt on oval? Well, the first is going to be a warm-up lap. So each of the cars is going to have the opportunity to have 2 warm-up laps before their actual time starts on qualification. This makes sure that the car setup is correct. It gets the tires warm, the engine ready to go, as well as just making sure that all the tools and the spotters and the engineers on the pit stand can make sure that the car is in working order. Once the driver completes their 2 warm-up laps, then the driver will have 2 timed laps. So once the green drops on their green flag laps, the qualification will consist of the full 2. Cumulative is the official qualifying time. And of course, the fastest time earns pole position. If there is a double header, so we do have a double header on the calendar in 2026 at Milwaukee, lap 1 will set the positions for race 1. So it's not a cumulative time when it comes to double headers. So let's say you can have pole in race 1 and then second place in race 2, because lap 2 is going to be your qualifying time for race 2. And I like that because then you're not doing qualification twice. You're not going to have 2 warm-up laps and then 2 cumulative laps for race 1, and then you go through the whole thing and then you got to go back and waste some more tires and do it all again. So for the Milwaukee Mile, when they qualify, lap 1, race 1, lap 2, race 2. If anything happens, let's say, well, if you crash, you're done. Right? If you don't complete both laps, you do not set a time, which means that if you crash, you're probably starting last. But if multiple people crash after you, you will be moved up a little bit, right? Which happened in Milwaukee, where we had a few crashes and, Felix did not end up being 27th. He ended up being like 25th, 24th. You have one chance to leave the staging pit for oval qualifying. So if you crash out or do not set a time, you basically are going to be starting from the back of the grid. You can't go, okay, well, we fixed the problem. Can we go back out? That's not how it works for oval qualifying. But there is a little bit of a difference when it comes to the Indy 500. So the Indy 500 starts with the order. The order is a blind draw, which happens I believe it's the evening before qualifying weekend starts. So basically, it's like a driver, or the driver might pick a loved one or a partner or their child or whoever to go up, pick a random number, and that's going to be their starting position. Which, if you're saying, hey, hubby, hey, wifey, hey, niece, nephew, can you go pick my D500 qualifying number and you qualify? You want to be later in the day, right? So let's say you qualify first. And you're like, eek, sorry, my bad. That would suck. So once everyone blind draws and everyone has their qualifying order, then they show up for qualifying session. Similar to normal oval qualifying, each car gets 2 warm-up laps, possibly 3 if approved by the race director, and then a qualification attempt includes 4 timed laps with a total time recorded as the official qualifying time. So for qualifying sessions, on day 1, you're going to have the full field of qualifying, which is going to be setting positions 12 through 30, 13 through 30, technically, right? And then positions 1 through 12 are still safe. Basically, whoever qualifies 13 through 30, that's where they're going to start the Indy 500. Anyone who qualifies 1 through 12 continues to day 2, and then anyone who qualifies 31st, 32nd, 33rd, 34th, 35th, 36th, let's say there's 40 entries, they are going to then be sent to last chance qualifying or bump day. Once 13 through 30 is set, the day is done. We then go to Sunday, which is going to be the last day of qualifying. And it's the same type of setup where each car gets 2 warm-up laps and then a qualification attempt of 4 timed laps. And you are now going to be in the first 12. Positions 7 through 12. After qualifying, that is where you start the Indy 500. So let's say you qualified 5th on Saturday, then you make it to the top 12 and you qualify 7th, you're starting 7th at the Indy 500. And then Positions 1 through 6 get sent to the Firestone Fast 6, and then they fight for pole. You also have last chance qualifying. This is going to determine positions 31 through 33. So in the Indy 500, only 33 cars can compete. So if there are 34 drivers, which we've seen, or even 40, only 31 through 32, or 33, can make it. Each car is guaranteed one attempt, and then they are allowed multiple tries until the time runs out. So basically, let's say that there's, everyone goes and you are 34th. You can go again. You can go again and again and again and again. But other drivers might also be trying to make their time up, right? So if you're on the cusp and you're like, oh, well, I beat that guy. Well, I'm going to go now and see if I can beat that guy. And it becomes like a ping pong match of who can beat that time, right? After the time runs out, time runs out. And so then the positions 31 through 33 are then set. Once bump day concludes, then we go on to the Firestone Fast 6. The Firestone Fast 6 determines positions 1 through 6, like I mentioned, and it's based on the top 12 times from the previous day. And they go back to qualifying. And they qualify where they finish, including the NTT P1 award for pole position. So in 2025, Robert Schwartzman, he set the fastest time in the Fast 6, which was crazy for not only a rookie who has never driven on an oval before, but also for a team that has never completed for the Indy 500. It was a Cinderella story. Basically, then positions 1 through 6 is completed. So between 2 days, you have 1 through 33, and then anyone who did not qualify. So 34th, let's say there are 40 entries, you go home, which sucks because you spent so much time going to practice, getting ready, spending money, getting sponsors, getting the engine leases, all that fun stuff. And then you get bumped. And we saw it this year. We had a teammate bump their teammate out for the Indy 500, which was, you could also see it's very gut-wrenching, which we'll definitely talk a little bit more about once we get closer to the month of May. So now let's conclude oval qualifying. So that's oval qualifying. And we'll make sure when we do ovals, when we do our pre-shows for the races like Phoenix and Milwaukee, we'll make sure to kind of do a little bit of a recap because sometimes it can get a little confusing, the fact that they have warm-up laps as well as time laps and then cool-down laps. So we'll make sure to include that, especially when we get to the month of May. But for road and street courses, qualifying consists of 3 segments. So segment 1, you have 2 groups based on the recorded times from final practice. So they split the group in half, and in essence, you have 2 groups. You have group A and you have group B. So let's say each group gets 10 minutes of track time, including full course cautions. So you have 10 minutes to set the best time, even if there's a caution or a yellow, right? The only time that the clock stops is for a red flag. Those laps are determined by qualifying positions. The top 6 from each group advance to segment 2. Group 1 occupies odd positions and group 2 occupies even. So now we have, our top 6 from segment 1. Now we move into segment 2. And segment 2 has 12 qualifying cars that additionally receive 10 additional timed minutes on track. This also includes full course yellows. The fastest 6 advance to the Firestone Fast 6. The remaining 6 are then ranked 7th through 12th based on their best laps. Then we move on to the Firestone Fast 6. 6 cars get 6 minutes of guaranteed green flag time, and then they are then ranked 1 through 6 based on the fastest laps. There is also some nuances to road and street qualifying, where if you fail to complete segments, the grid is set by the last completed segment. Fastest time claims pole position. So let's say there is 30 seconds left and somebody causes a red flag, a yellow flag, and you are unable to complete the session. The grid is set by the last completed segment. If no segments complete, grid is then based on entrance points. So let's say you have a 2022 circa spa situation where it's just raining cats and dogs, and you in qualifying cannot be moved to another time, or you can't do qualifying the next day. And the grid is then set based on entrance points. For any interference in qualifying, so this is what's interesting and a little bit different from Formula One. Red flag situations disqualify best 2 laps for the segment. Significant interference nullifies all times. So if you cause a red flag, your times are automatically deleted and you do not set a time. And primarily, if you're causing a red flag, you're probably crashing, which means you're going to start either last if it's in segment 1, 12th in segment 2, or 6th, the Firestone Pack 6. Yellow flags that disrupt other cars lead to lap disqualification. So a lot of impeding, all of that fun stuff. For double header race qualifying, which we haven't had for road and street courses, but it's possible. The rules for qualifying is that each race has separate sessions, groups based on practice times. Each group has 12 minutes on track with 5 guaranteed green flag minutes. Fastest car in each group earns championship points on both, or qualifying on both days. So that's qualifying in a nutshell. I really do prefer this type of qualifying, especially for road and street courses over F1. I do like the fact that it's kind of like playoff situation. Like you got to get to the fast 6 kind of thing. So now let's talk a little bit about testing, since we're only a few weeks away from testing. There's a little bit of a different type of testing that IndyCar does. When we're thinking about the schedule, we want to make sure that, each test is run to gather crucial data for the teams, right? We want to make sure that Firestone is getting the appropriate data on tires and what tires to bring to certain tracks. And also, if you want to try something different with tires or with engine modes, or just for drivers who may or may not have, raced in IndyCar before to have a chance to test. Mick Schumacher. So testing regulations include that 2 test days are required for each NTT IndyCar Series team, completing in at least 12 races. And they're available from the end of one season to the next. So let's say you have a team that's playing, only doing half a season, they're still required to do 2 days of testing. Open tests are available to all teams, and they're scheduled for at least this year. We have some at the Phoenix Raceway, as well as IMS. And we talked a little bit about this last episode, but we also have rookie testing for new drivers before the Indy 500, with additional test days for teams with rookie drivers. Driver evaluation test days also exist for less experienced drivers, which is limited to 1 per season. And then you also can do extra team test days for teams with both full-time IndyCar and Indy Next entries. And then Firestone could also conduct their own tests, especially when it comes to, let's say, new tire compounds or new tires in general. Like, for example, when they brought on the new green tires, I'm assuming that they were asking teams to come in and do testing for them, which requires at least 2 cars with multiple teams participating in all the tests. These regulations ensure that teams are maximizing their testing opportunities while maintaining competitive integrity. Testing is very important. It makes sure that it's not about timing and scoring and how fast these drivers are hitting up the tracks. It's more also to help with, you're practicing pit stops, you're practicing getting the car set up. If you're like Will with Andretti, you're learning how to communicate, you're learning driving styles and how, an oval spotters can communicate with you, or your engineering stand. Like Will might want no one to talk to him unless it's critical, or he might want somebody chit-chatting in his ear the entire time. You figure this stuff out, and the pit crews also practice and get, in the swing of things. The engineers get in the swing of things. So tests are also very important for just overall team operations as well. And as race fans, we tend to not look at tests and say, oh my God, that team was blown out of the water, because you don't know. You don't know if engine modes are to 100 or if they're at 50%. You don't know if they're running a special secret tire that's heavier compound over other teams. So while we love to see cars on track, tests are done for different reasons, and they're a required part of, the IndyCar series and the Indy Next series, right? You want these drivers to have time behind the wheel, which is the most important part. And when they're racing, let's talk a little bit about push to pass. So push to pass is a feature in the IndyCar series that provides temporary horsepower boost for overtaking or to even just defend when you're racing. So there's a button on the steering wheel, I believe it probably says P2P, push to pass, and this boost has a limited duration, requiring, strategic use. And also it goes back to fuel management. You don't want to just burn all of your push to pass during one stint because you're going to burn more fuel. The push to pass feature enhances turbocharged boost or hybrid power for a speed advantage, which unlike Formula One's DRS, RIP, DRS aided with aerodynamics. And push to pass actually came out a few years before DRS was actually brought to the F1 grid. And it's really interesting to think that, IndyCar had push to pass, and now with overtake mode or mom mode, I'm never going to forget the fact that they wanted to call that damn thing mom mode. While it's different, it's still very similar to the push to pass ideology. So how does push to pass work? When you are eligible to start using push to pass, we'll talk about push to pass gate. We'll get there, Monica. We'll get there. Don't get ahead of yourself. You are able to push the steering wheel, the button, and when applicable, the car's computer will then signal to boost power. The system temporarily increases the engine power, adding about 60 additional horsepowers to the Indy car through an enhanced turbocharger pressure of the hybrid energy. Each race allows a total usage of 150 to 200 seconds, depending on race, and it's divided into segments, i.e. 15 to 20 seconds. So you can't just be pushing the push to pass button for 200 full seconds. Also, you'll run out of fuel before you do that. So the drivers need to choose wisely when to use push to pass, and it's balancing the difference between being on offense and being on defense. You might use it for overtaking, assistance, and it's designed to facilitate better overtaking, and it enhances, the race, right? You don't have these giant DRS-like trains like in F1 where if you can't overtake, you're not going to. But push to pass is not available on ovals. Push to pass is primarily used on road and street courses. I don't think these cars on ovals are already trimmed out. We don't need any additional horsepower. And, it's up to the driver, right? The engineering stand might say, hey, you should use it, but the driver is the one that is actually the person who is pressing it. And if you're not Scott Dixon, you have to be careful with using it, because if you're running low on fuel and you're fuel saving, you may not want to use push to pass, right? And you can tell, during the race, the broadcast will show how much push to pass each driver has left. And it does become strategic. If you are fuel saving and you're using less push to pass, you might be able to burn all that rest of that fuel quicker towards the end of the, race, while other drivers might have used it earlier on in the race. There's also a very big key difference to push to pass. So with the addition of the new hybrid engine, drivers are able to deploy the hybrid in spurts throughout the race as well. And the key difference between push to pass and the new hybrid system is that push to pass relies on traditional fuel and has strict time limits, while the hybrid system uses a supercapacitor to store energy from braking and throttle lift without time restrictions. This allows drivers to access an additional 120 horsepower whenever available, highlighting the contrast between timed push to pass and the unlimited hybrid power. So hybrid power is more from an electrical accumulation perspective in the supercapacitor. And the mechanism for the hybrid unit is energy is captured, similar when you're braking, and then it's stored. It's then released, and as an additional boost, approximately, let's say, an additional 60 horsepower using the same motor generation. And because there's no specific time limit on usage, however, it is constrained by the amount of energy stored in the recharging process, you can actually integrate push to pass and hybrid energy deployment at the same So some drivers will deploy the hybrid and push to pass to do a massive overtake or to floor it and try to get ahead of the driver behind you to be able to break a toe or possibly even overtake more than one car. So now drivers are getting, they're starting to use both options versus just using the traditional push to pass. Hybrid, you can use it whenever. And if you're braking in the corners and you're recharging the battery, then you use push to pass. It might be a nice competitive advantage. So when we think about the difference between push to pass and overtake mode or mom mode, come on, let's call it mom mode, we can now talk a little bit about the differences of push to pass in an F1 capacity as well. So like I mentioned, push to pass is going to be strategic total power boost. It's fuel, it's engine related for a limited amount of time. And the point of it is to encourage tactical management of power throughout the race. But for overtake mode, it's going to offer temporary electrical power boost within 1 second of the car ahead. So activation really depends on the proximity and the energy available. While replacing DRS, which was an aerodynamic advantage, promoting tactical overtaking is based on hybrid power. So I view mom mode or overtake mode as a hybrid deployment like an IndyCar, but it's only allowed in certain scenarios versus an IndyCar hybrid deployment can be used whenever you have a recharged battery. So you have push to pass, which adds more strategic depth to power management and fuel management, which in F1, there's no fuel management. And then overtake mode emphasizes technical overtaking using hybrid power instead of just horsepower and speed. So it's very interesting to see this new dynamic shift in F. But let's go back in time a little bit and talk about push to pass gate and how Team Penske took push to pass beyond its limit in 2024. So in 2024 at St. Pete, Team Penske was found to have illegally used the push to pass system during a recent IndyCar warm-up session that weekend, despite it being inactive due to technical issues. Most teams complied, but telemetry showed that the Penske cars continued to activate push to pass, leading to an investigation. This actually resulted in the disqualification of Joseph Newgarden's win and Scott McLaughlin's third place finish, while Will Power received a penalty. So the reason why Will wasn't disqualified was because he did not use the push to pass feature at all, right? The team got penalized, and because of that, Will got penalized. Sorry, Will. I genuinely think those points would have been really important for your championship run, but whatever. But it also started to create the rift between Joseph Newgarden and Scotty Mack, which we saw at the end of Bus Bros. If you're not familiar with Bus Bros, please go to YouTube and watch that. Scotty and Joseph had such a blast, but you can tell that this quote, cheating scandal or push to pass gate really showed some cracks in the Penske perfect facade that was really starting to come to surface in the organization. They said it was a software error in the ECU from hybrid testing, and Joseph Newgarden will die on this hill that he didn't know that there was push to pass, available, but the guy used it for like 13 seconds when he wasn't supposed to. Scotty Mack, on the other hand, sometimes drivers just push buttons on the steering wheel during restarts of an IndyCar race, and he probably pushed the button, felt the car, because you do feel that woof of extra horsepower, and went, wait, this isn't right, and let go. Joseph used it multiple times, which, as somebody who's talked about it more openly on this podcast, sounds a little hinky, in my opinion. It also then opened up, suggestions to the IndyCar community about suggesting that they may have bypassed signal restrictions, saying we're concerned about IndyCar's monitoring capabilities. And now, as a result, IndyCar has implemented measures to prevent future infractions, highlighting the need for rigorous enforcement of push to pass. And you now have this new officiating board, right? Which is really sad because then Penske had another quote cheating or scandal, attenuator gate in 2025, right? So hopefully 2026, they keep their nose clean and they don't have any scandals, because I'm running out of cute little gate names, right? What's next? Tire gate? Engine Gate, Joseph Newgarden Gate, David Malukas Gate, right? So it was definitely something where people were talking about push to pass and they knew what it was. But because of push to pass gate, a lot of people started talking a lot about push to pass and what was right, what was wrong, and what the drivers thought. And, if you want, the press conference that Joseph Newgarden threw himself is on YouTube if you want to watch it. And you can make decisions if you're new to IndyCar, and you can figure out who you want to believe in this situation. Damn, I love a good bit of gossip. So that is going to be part 2 of IndyCar Basics. We want to make sure that we're doing this in bite-sizable pieces for you guys. We know that there's going to be so many nuances during a race weekend, but just wanted to make sure that, we have the basics covered. In next episode, we're going to take a little bit of time to go into leadership circle points and what the hell does that mean, and the point system in IndyCar, which is going to be more of a deeper dive. Monica's going to try to do math. What? Maybe I'll do it poorly. How about that? I'll set the bar really low. And we'll also talk about the award processes as well as the safety and officiating teams, which by next week's episode, we should have a good benchmark to kick off 2026. We'll spend some time, like I mentioned, talking about Indy Next and the drivers and teams in Indy Next. And then I'll set the stage for our season kickoff with hopefully all the teams identified, coin, Prema, and who's on the grid, who's a rookie, who moved teams, and start preparing for St. Pete, y'all. So we really appreciate you taking a listen to this week's episode. If you want to take a listen to more episodes from Lap It Like It's Hot, you can listen on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You can also give us a lovely follow on socials at Lap It Like It's Hot. And if there's any other topics that you want to hear from us, drop a comment, leave us a DM. Well, that's it, everyone. I really hope that you enjoyed this week's episode, and stay tuned to IndyCar Basics Part 3 coming soon. All right, see ya. Bye.